Dr. Paul Mason. Sleep better without drugs. Use simple habits and hygiene.
When we talk about sleep hygiene, we talk about simple things. So the first and obvious one is I say to people, what time do you go to bed? And if they can't tell me a time, it means they don't have a regular bedtime. Mm-hmm. Or it means they're embarrassed because they know it's too late. So here's the thing. If I fly from here to Hong Kong, it's like 3-4 hours difference. I know that that will be enough to upset my body clock, right? 3 hours is enough to upset my body clock. And some people will go to bed at 9 o'clock one night and midnight another night. And they'll regularly have these fluctuations on a week-to-week basis. We know that if you go traveling somewhere, it takes about 3 weeks for your body clock to reset itself fully if you go on a transatlantic flight, for instance. So if you're constantly every night or 2 nights changing your bedtime, your body is in a constant state of discombobulation. You need the same bedtime. And then you need to give yourself enough time in bed. This business about, I can get away on 7 hours sleep. Yeah, you can probably get away on it, but you're not going to be functioning optimally. So, and I could point you to a lot of studies, but I won't bore you with the details. I'll just say it's got to be 8 hours. Let's just accept you've got to have 8 hours. And let's also accept that if you spend 8 hours in bed, you're not sleeping for 8 hours. So you need to allow a bit of fat on the bone. So maybe spend 8.5 hours in bed. That would be a good point. Now, let's also understand that the part of the body clock, the circadian rhythm that is most rigid, is the time you wake up. You often just wake up at the same time any day. That's hard to control. So, on a weekend, you're tired as, you've cancelled the alarm, and you still wake up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and you want to sleep, but you can't. So if you need to sleep longer, you have to go to bed earlier. You can't rely on sleeping in longer. So that's a very simple rule. Just pick when you are going to wake up, go back 8.5 hours. That's your new bedtime. And that is a strict bedtime every night with no little variation. Then we have some, things like temperature. People don't realize that the optimal sleeping temperature is about 19 degrees C. That's actually really cold.
That's really cold.
So, you get a nice doona, that's a perfect temperature to sleep in. They've got studies that show this repeatedly. And then if you share the bed with a partner, don't use the same doona. Have 2 separate doonas. But this is something I was first introduced in Scandinavia, and it makes a hell of a lot of sense because it puts an end to these doona wars. And at nighttime, I mean, you're all about the hormones, so you all know all about these bright lights suppressing melatonin secretion. So at night, after a certain time, there is no overhead lights on. It's only lamps, and I prefer to have red lamps. And, if you've got to get up to, feed a child or something like that in the middle of the night, well, you can have red globes that are even better than just low wattage globes. So red light, it doesn't really suppress your melatonin as much at all. Put filters on your phone and your screens and things like that. So there's a hell of a lot of things that we can do just around our habits of sleep, focusing on temperature, habits, exposure to light, separate doonas, that actually, for most people, will significantly improve their sleep. And because I really don't like drugs. So beyond melatonin, all these ones that we call the Z's or Zopiclone or Zolpidem or these kind of ones, they're, they can induce what we call parasomnias and people acting out their dreams, and they have side effects. We have the benzodiazepine class, which are, stimulate the same receptors as alcohol, and they tend to be addictive. They tend to, habit forming, and they lose their effectiveness over time as well. So people end up dependent on them, and they don't end up with any benefit. So from a pharmacological perspective, sleep is really a dead end. There's no effective strategies that we have long term.
Sleep hygiene is a number of simple things. Dr. Mason says, I ask my patients, what time do you go to bed? If they cannot answer, it's probably not regular, or they go to bed very late. Irregular bedtime is like jet lag. It takes 3 weeks to reset the body clock. To function optimally, you need the same bedtime consistently and enough sleep time, 8 hours minimum, maybe 8.5 hours in bed so you actually sleep 8 full hours. Circadian rhythms. The most rigid is the time you wake up. For example, on the weekend, you stayed up late, you're tired in the morning, but you cannot sleep in. This upsets your circadian rhythm. To get full 8 hours, get to bed earlier so that you can wake up at the regular time. A simple rule. Pick the time you need to wake up each day. Count back 8.5 hours. That is your bedtime. Keep to this strictly with very little variation. What is the ideal sleeping temperature? 19 degrees Celsius or 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Cool? Yes. But if you have a nice duvet, don't share the duvet with a partner. It can work very, very well. Use proper lighting. Bright lights suppress melatonin secretion. So, late night, no overhead bright lights. Use low light or red lamps. Red light doesn't suppress melatonin. Use a light filter on your phone. To summarize, these are great sleep habits. Get the right length of sleep, at least 8 hours. Consistency, go to bed at the same time. Temperature, keep it cool. Lighting, keep it low or red. Use separate duvets. Dr. Mason says, I don't like drugs. Melatonin is a supplement and it works great. But the Z class of drugs induce parasomnia, blocks dreams, they have side effects. Benzodiazepine group of drugs affect the same receptors as alcohol, and they are addictive. Annotated, summarized. Please share with a loved one.